Just the mayor before the public, and Gary will get into the number of meetings. We have a lot of input and on our website. So I might ask Gary and Jim to take us through this, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This has been a very deliberate, open, and transparent process, as we do every year. Every spring, we go through the budget planning process, and it's actually a 6-month process, which starts in January and February, when staff starts to review the needs and looks at the trends within their workload. In March, we start receiving preliminary revenue figures from the state and other outside agencies, as well as inflationary increases, and then we also project the cost of doing business, our expenses for the upcoming fiscal year. We then hold a series of public workshops in April. Each year we hold 3 public workshops. The first one focused on a series of presentations from staff. I believe this year it was about 3.5 hours, and we went through every detail of what staff does, the metrics of each department, of what their deliverables are, and essentially looking forward to next year. What are some workload issues and what we need to address from a fiscal perspective? The next budget workshop looked at our revenues and our projected revenues, and collectively assigning numbers to what staff was presenting at the original workshop. The third workshop is a presentation of the draft program budget, and essentially the council and community were given the draft for about a week to review that and come back with any questions. That draft budget has been on our website and part of a series of news releases through our newsletter and through local papers over the last 7 weeks. So it's been out there for 7 weeks so the public can review and critique essentially the upcoming fiscal year budget. That leads us to last month, in which our May council meeting, we adopt the bottom line figure of $14 million. That's our expenditure limit for the upcoming fiscal year. So we can't exceed that expenditure limit, but we can move money around within those departments. And that leads us to tonight, which is our final budget meeting, public meeting, which is our public hearing. In advance of this public hearing, we advertise Schedule A through G given to us by the Auditor General. So throughout the state of Arizona, every municipality is advertising those respective schedules. So it's a combination of all the expenses and revenues that a respective community has, and you'll see it in all the local papers. The new fiscal year begins on July 1st, so that's our target. At a very high level, this is our budget dashboard. On the left side is our operational revenues, and on the right side are our operational expenses. So these are our reoccurring revenues and our reoccurring expenses. Essentially, our forecasted reoccurring revenues are about a little bit over $7 million for this next fiscal year. A lion's share of that is our municipal sales tax, 60% of that. We are a sales tax centric financial community. We're focused on collecting sales tax. That's what pays the bills in Carefree. In other communities, they're propped up with a primary and secondary property tax. We don't assess those. So we are driven, our financial model is driven through the collection of sales tax. And that's why we look at diversification. In our last discussion with water, they talked about diversification of the water portfolio. We look at the diversification of our tax base, and that's economic development. There are many communities throughout the state of Arizona that are heavily reliant on sales tax, and each one of those communities are looking at economic development efforts to capture those coming into the community and spend money, dollars in the community that result in revenue to provide services to the residents. So it's very important, obviously, with a sales tax centric model to diversify and ensure that we're not heavily dependent on one revenue stream. We also have a share of state shared revenue. Approximately a quarter of our revenue comes from the state through state income tax and state sales tax, highway user revenue funds, and vehicle license tax. That's about $1.7 million. User fees are a cost recovery model at about $1.1 million. And those are the fees that we assess for services such as building permit fees, for example. Our anticipated operational expenses, the lion's share of that is public safety, 40%. If we go to automatic aid, you can notch that probably up above 50%. I don't know many communities where public safety is above 50%. So it would be a significant lift for this community, and something that one of the topics that were discussed in the council meeting is public safety tonight. And it's something that should be part of our community dialogue that we have with our residents, and we're looking to do that this fall. But public safety, of the $6.6 million that we're looking to invest in the community this year, 2.6 million of that is for our public safety services. And then evenly split between human resources and operations, we have about $2 million each between those respective categories. Once again, in the center of the slide is our capital reserve funds at about $11.5 million. You'll see the delta, the difference between the operational revenues and the operational expenses of, if we add the contingency to our operational expenses, brings it up to about $6.8 million. The difference is typically the construction sales tax, our one-time fee that we collect from new construction. That will be diminishing as we reach build out. Obviously, there's not much left to build in Carefree. And so we won't be collecting that construction sales tax in the future. But historically, we have placed that difference, that surplus, into our reserves to fund the aging infrastructure in Carefree. So that includes some of our culverts, that includes signage, that includes pavement maintenance, and it also includes our fire infrastructure. Where in the past we have invested over $10 million in fire infrastructure within this community, and we continue to do so. So we have about $5 million of investment in those respective categories for this next fiscal year. So that's an overall snapshot of our budget. Once again, our total expenditure for the next fiscal year is about $14.2 million. Challenge anybody to find any community within the metropolitan area that has a budget this small. We have one of the smallest budgets and the smallest staffs within the state of Arizona, period. We're very conservative, very proud about that, and our staff does many different tasks, but we have one of the smallest budgets in the state. There are exclusions as per Arizona revised statute to those expenditure limits, and it's our WIFA loan, essentially the interest that we get off of our investments. We are looking at some grants for fire and flood control, about $1.25 million. We have some lottery funds that come in, our highway user funds, which are allocated to street maintenance, as well as a utility fund that is paid to us by Southwest Gas, which can only be used for our streets. And then we have some federal funds coming in for water infrastructure that amount to about $650,000. All those are exclusions to the expenditure limit. That totals about $3.5 million. So if you do that deduction, we have about $10.6 million in expenses that go towards our statutory expenditure limit, which is established by state law. And that statutory expenditure limit is about $11.5 million. So we're under that statutory expenditure limit with those exclusions by about $900,000. So we meet all those requirements. Every year, our auditors review this. It's an important part of the audit every fall, and they validate these numbers. So the action in front of council tonight is the adoption of resolution 2022-11, approving the final budget for this fiscal year in the Auditor General Forms A through G. That being said, Mayor, members of council, we'd be glad to address any questions. Once again, this is a public hearing, so we have to open it up for the public hearing, allow any public comments to be made, and then close the public hearing, and then a motion for consideration of resolution 2022-11.
Thank you, Mr. Neese. Do any members of the council have a question or comment?
Just to mention for those who aren't aware, the state shared revenue fund is 1.7 million that we received. That's a number that is continually declining because it's based on population growth and relocation. So that's something we all need to be aware of. That's what we have to take care of each year, that shortfall.
Thank you. That's an excellent comment. State revenues are paid out in proportion to population. You have places like Glendale and Mesa and Apache Junction that are growing geometrically, and we're approaching build out. Do any members of the public have a question or a comment? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. And I would look for a motion to approve resolution 2022-11, which is adopting estimates of proposed expenditures by the town of Carefree for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023, and declaring that such shall constitute the budget for the town of Carefree for such fiscal year.
I move we approve resolution 2022-11.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Why don't we take 5 minutes?
Mayor,
Yes,
excuse me, I need a motion to adjourn, please.
okay. Motion's been made to adjourn and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you.